What's the real nightmare? The danger you're running from, or the one that welcomes you with open arms? Sometimes survival means becoming a ghost, living in the silence. But the problem is, silence has predators of its own, and they hunt best in the dark. Welcome to Nightmare at 3 a.m. If you believe every story deserves to be heard, hit that like button so this one doesn't get lost in the shadows. Subscribe to join those who listen in the dark. And the question I leave you with is, if you couldn't call for help, where would you run? My name is Javier, and to the United States government, I do not exist. I am an undocumented immigrant. 6 weeks ago, I crossed an invisible border that changed everything, trading one kind of fear for another. I left behind the dust of the desert and the dread of the patrol to find a new kind of fear in the shadows of Los Angeles. Today, I have a roof over my head. It's not much. It's a tiny room with a window that looks out onto a brick wall and a mattress that has more lumps than a sack of potatoes. But after all that, it felt like paradise. The apartment is on the second floor of an old building in Boyle Heights, and I share it with 5 other men, ghosts with different accents, united by the same silence. Mr. Rojas, the owner, made the rules very clear when he handed me the key in exchange for a wad of crumpled bills. Cash every Friday. No visitors, no noise, no police. You don't live here, understand? You're just a shadow paying rent. I understood perfectly. I was paying to be invisible. The house smells of mold, old coriander, and the sweat of many tired men, but it was supposed to be my sanctuary. I just didn't know that some hells are the very place you choose to take shelter. The first few nights, I blamed it on fatigue. I could hear low whispers in Spanish drifting down the hallway. With 6 men living together, that was normal. But sometimes, the sound seemed to come from the wall next to my bed, a wall I knew was outside, and the voice was always old and dry. Then my belongings began to disappear. Small, worthless things. A lighter, a pen, the only photo I had of my mother. Anger and distrust made the air even heavier, but I said nothing. Complaining was making noise. The discomfort set in fully when the small wooden statue of St. Jude Thaddeus that my grandmother had given me began to appear face down every morning, no matter how many times I stood it upright. It was a subtle, silent message. Something was entering my room while I slept. Something was watching me. My ability to lie to myself was gone with the padlock. I had bought a flimsy padlock for my bedroom door, more for the illusion of privacy than security. On Friday, I came home from my dishwasher job around 1 in the morning to find the door ajar, the padlock hanging open. Nothing had been stolen, but the wooden saint was lying there again. The next day, I summoned up the courage to speak to Hector, the oldest resident. I found him in the kitchen, and before I could finish speaking, he interrupted me without even looking at me. "The doors here don't hold what's already inside," he whispered. He picked up his coffee mug and, before disappearing into the hallway, looked at me with genuine terror in his eyes. "Just don't show fear. The house doesn't like it when we show fear." His warning, confirming my terror, was worse than any broken door. It wasn't a burglar, it was the house. After my conversation with Hector, the fear became a physical presence. The apartment felt colder in spots, even in the California heat. A smell of damp, rotting earth would come and go without explanation. The whispers grew bolder, and I began to think I could hear my own name being called in that dry, ancient voice. One night, I woke up at 3:14 a.m., my heart pounding. There was no reason for it until I heard the slow creak of my bedroom door opening by itself in the darkness. I didn't see anything, but I could feel the air in the room grow heavy, as if someone had come in. I squeezed my eyes shut, holding my breath, praying for dawn to come. Confirmation came days later. I was heading to the bathroom in the middle of the night when, at the end of the dimly lit hallway, I saw a glimmer. It wasn't one of my roommates. It was something tall, hunched, and dark, moving with unnatural speed and disappearing into Hector's room without opening the door. The height of terror came one Sunday afternoon when, by some rare chance, I was alone in the apartment. A low sound, like fingernails scratching wood, drew me down the hall. The sound was coming from a small closet I had never seen open before. Today, the door was ajar. My instincts screamed at me to run, but a morbid curiosity pulled me forward. I pushed the door open. The smell of mold and dust was suffocating. Inside, there were no monsters. There was something worse. On the floor, in neat little piles, were dozens of personal items. A cheap wristwatch, a broken rosary, a single pearl earring, a faded photo of a smiling family, and in the middle of it all, my picture of my mother. They were trophies. They were the little things that had disappeared, not just from me, but from countless residents before me. As I stared, transfixed, a whisper materialized just behind my ear, so close I felt a damp chill. "Your picture is my favorite," said the old dry voice. I turned with a scream, but no one was there. The closet door slammed shut with a violent force, plunging me into total darkness and the smell of lost things. I don't know how long I stood there screaming until my throat was raw. Suddenly, the door simply opened. I was freed. I understood that this was a game. I ran to my room, grabbed my backpack with my passport and the little money I had, and ran to the front door, breaking all the rules of silence and invisibility. The fear of the house had finally overcome the fear of immigration. I didn't care anymore. I ran outside into the sunlight, panting, feeling the relief of escape. But my run was interrupted on the porch. Mr. Rojas was there, standing as if he had been waiting for me. Beside him was another young man with the same tired and hopeful look that I had when I arrived. Rojas put a hand on my shoulder, his grip surprisingly strong, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes formed on his face. "Are you leaving already, Javier?" "What a shame," he said calmly. Then he turned to the newcomer and nodded toward the building. "Don't worry," I told the boy. "We have a room that just became vacant." In that moment, I understood everything. Mr. Rojas was not just a landlord, he was the caretaker of the trap. He brought the prey. And as I looked into the face of the boy who would be my replacement, I saw myself and knew with a certainty that froze my soul that the doors of that house never opened outward. My name is Marisol, and my life consists of two smells: the damp earth of the lettuce fields of the Salinas Valley and the sweet smell of my 5-year-old daughter, Luna's hair. For an undocumented woman in California, every day is a tightrope walk. I work from sunrise to sunset with a hunched back and chapped hands for money that barely covers the rent on our cramped trailer and the food on the table. My deepest fear is not poverty, but the sound of a car screeching to a halt, the knock on the door that could mean the end of everything, the fear that Luna will be ripped away from me, or worse, that Luna will be ripped away from me. Our house is a metal box in the middle of a farm labor camp, a place of dust and weary hopes. At night, the women gather outside, speaking softly in Spanish, sharing fears and home remedies. That's where I first heard about her. They didn't talk about Santa Maria or any of the saints from the church my grandmother had taught me to pray to. They talked about La Milagrosa del Campo, the miraculous lady of the fields. Elena, an older woman with a face as furrowed as the earth she worked, said the saint was older than the fences, that she protected her own, those who had no one else to turn to. She said La Milagrosa was jealous and demanding, but she would never abandon a daughter who asked for her protection with her heart in her hand. I listened, but I kept my faith in my small, worn rosary. I was afraid to ask for help from a power I didn't understand. Panic arrived on a Tuesday, carried on a hot wind. Word spread through the fields like wildfire through dry grass. An ice raid was imminent. Maybe that night, maybe the next morning. I saw the terror in the other mother's eyes, a reflection of my own. That afternoon, as I was picking lettuce, I saw an unmarked white van parked on the road in the distance, watching. My blood ran cold. That night, with Luna asleep in my arms, despair finally broke through my caution. I remembered a small, dark wooden idol I'd found buried near our trailer when we'd first moved in, a crudely carved female figure. Elena had said that La Milagrosa appeared in many forms. I picked up the statuette, which was cool to the touch, and placed it on a crate of oranges in the corner of our trailer. I lit the only candle I had. I didn't pray in the words of the church. I whispered a raw prayer born of terror. Protect my daughter, I begged the wooden figure. Not for me, for her. Keep them away. I'll do anything. The next morning, the camp was tensely silent. No one went to work. We waited. The day passed, and nothing. That night, Elena's son, who worked in town, brought the news. There had been a serious accident on the main highway, the only entrance to our camps. A pileup involving 3 semi-trucks and a police car. The road would be blocked for days. The ice raid would not happen. The other women breathed a sigh of relief, thanking God. But Elena found me in the darkness between the trailers, and her eyes lit up. She heard you, she whispered, and the shiver that ran down my spine was not of relief. It was of a new, unfamiliar fear. A week after the miracle of the road, the saint's protection showed itself in a darker form. There was a foreman on the plantation, an American named Frank, who delighted in humiliating the women. His eyes lingered too long, his hands accidentally brushing our backs. He had cornered me near the porta potties the day before, his voice low and menacing, telling me that one word from him could put me on a bus back home, but that he could help if I was nice to him. Fear made me sick. That night, I knelt before the dark statue again, this time in anger and revulsion, and begged him to leave me alone. The next day, Frank didn't show up for work. Word got around that he had had an accident at home. He had slipped off a ladder while cleaning the gutter and broken both his legs so badly that the doctors didn't know if he would ever walk properly again. A complicit silence settled over the camps. No one said anything, but everyone knew This was Camp Justice. It was her justice. When I returned to the trailer that night, the proof that this was no coincidence was on my little altar. The wooden statuette, which I always kept facing the wall, was now facing the door like a watchful guard. And the small wildflowers I had picked for her days ago, which should have been wilted and dry by now, were lush and colorful, as if they had just sprouted. I went to find Elena, my heart a mixture of gratitude and dread. I told her about the flowers, about the statue. She just shook her head as if explaining something obvious to a child. You asked for help, and she gave it to you, Marisol. You are one of her daughters now. There is no going back. Just be grateful. The way she said it with such frightening finality made me realize the truth. I had made a pact, and the power that now protected me would not accept being ignored. The protection I had begged for began to feel like a cage. The presence in the trailer became constant, a silent watchfulness that set my nerves on edge. The air seemed thicker, and a faint smell of ozone, like the air after a lightning strike, hung permanently in the small space. But the real escalation of terror came not through me, but through my Luna. She started having nightmares, not the kind that make a child cry and run to her mother's arms. They were silent nightmares. I would wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that something was wrong and find her sitting up in her bed, her eyes open, staring at the dark corner of the trailer where the altar was. She wouldn't answer when I called her name, just lay there motionless for minutes that felt like hours before lying down and going back to sleep as if nothing had happened. One morning, she hummed a melody as she played with her dolls. It was a strange, discordant lullaby that I had never heard before. "What's that song, mi amor?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Luna looked at me with her big, serious eyes and said, "It's the skinny lady's song. She sings it to me when the lights go out." My blood turned to ice. The thin lady. The entity had a description now, born from my daughter's mind. I began to hear it too. Not the song, but whispers. They were hissing, like wind rustling through dry leaves, coming from the wall behind Luna's bed. They seemed to soothe her, but to me, they were the sound of hell itself. Then came the gifts. One morning, I found a dead bird on our doorstep, its body perfectly intact, without a drop of blood. The next week, a small snake, coiled in a perfect circle. They were offerings. They were trophies from a predator marking its territory and its property, us. The trailer was no longer our refuge. It was its nest. Hope came in the form of a phone call. My cousin, who lived in Oregon, had found me a job working in a greenhouse and a small apartment. A safe place, away from the fields, away from immigration patrols. It was a real chance, a lifeline thrown into the pit I was sinking into. I decided that night. We were leaving. I didn't tell anyone, not even Elena. I was irrationally afraid that if I spoke up, the earth itself would trap me. I waited for Luna to fall asleep. With my heart beating wildly, I began to pack our few clothes and belongings into 2 backpacks. Every noise in the trailer sounded like a scream. The air became cold, icy, and the only light in the trailer began to flicker. The whispers began louder, more insistent, coming from every corner. I ignored them. It was now or never. With the backpacks on my back and Luna asleep in my arms, I went to the door. I turned the handle, locked. I tried again with all my strength. The door didn't budge an inch. It was sealed as if it were welded shut. Panicked, I ran to the small kitchen window. Stuck. The glass one over the sink, it wouldn't budge. We were sealed inside. That was when the voice became perfectly clear in my mind. It wasn't a whisper. It was a thought that wasn't my own, a feminine voice, ancient and possessive, that seemed to resonate in my very bone. Don't go, my little dove. The world out there is cruel. No one will care for you like I will. You are mine, my daughters, my property. Terror paralyzed me, but the final blow came from Luna. In my arms, she stirred and, still asleep, began to hum the melody of the Thin Lady. Then she raised her small hand and placed it on the door, as if helping to keep it closed. In that moment, my soul shattered. The protection I had asked for my daughter had become her cage, and she, the little jailer. I could not fight against a power that already lived inside the heart I loved most. The door remained sealed until the sun rose. As the first rays of light filtered through the window, I heard the soft click of the lock unlocking of its own accord. The chance to escape with my cousin was gone. The fight was over. I was defeated. Slowly, I took off my backpacks and began unpacking them, putting each piece of clothing back in its place. Luna woke, smiling, as if the previous night had been nothing more than a bad dream just for me. I had traded a prison of fear and barbed wire for one of possessive love and ancient power. At least, I told myself, Luna was safe. It was the lie I had to tell to survive. Months passed. I became a model worker, quiet and efficient, never looking anyone in the eye. I went to the little altar every night, changing the evergreen flowers and lighting a candle, no longer with fear, but with the resignation of a prisoner who has learned the rules. The presence was always there, a constant weight in the air, a jealous and invisible mother. Last week, a new family arrived at the camp. A young mother, younger than me, with a face lined with despair, and a small child who coughed incessantly. That night, Elena came to me. Her dark eyes seemed to see right through me. "Her son is sick, Marisol," she said, her voice low. "La Milagrosa can heal the little ones, but a stranger's faith is like mist, weak and uncertain." She paused, and her next words sealed my fate. "But the lady listens to her favorite daughters. She will hear you. Pray for them, Marisol. Pray with your heart." I looked into the darkness toward the new family's trailer and heard the child's soft cough. I understood my true role. I was not just a ward. I was a tool, a decoy. My faith, now proven and chained, was the bridge to bring new souls into their fold. The relief the new mother sought came through me, and I, looking at my own trailer where my daughter slept under the watchful eye of her protector, knew that I would make the request. I would lead her to the same altar, teach her the same prayer, because the price of my daughter's safety was another's soul. The cycle did not end with me. It began again through me. My name is Carlos, and to the American government, I am a pair of hands working in construction. To myself, I am a ghost who by some miracle made it through the hell of the Sonoran Desert and now haunts a small apartment in Houston. Here, the air is heavy and humid, so different from the dry heat that nearly killed me. The humidity clings to my skin, but it never seems to quench the thirst that has settled in my soul since the crossing. I drink gallons of water, but my throat is always dry. My mouth always tastes of dust. Every night, I close my eyes and I am no longer in Texas. I am back on the sand under a white, merciless sun, and beside me walks my friend Miguel, his face growing thinner and thinner, his lips more and more cracked until he stops walking. I keep going. This is my sin and my haunting. It started out subtle, easy to ignore. I'd find fine, pale sand in places where it shouldn't be, inside my work boots, even after a day in the mud at a construction site, on the floor of my freshly swept apartment. Sometimes I'd wake up with a thin layer of it on my pillow. I told myself it was the dust from the trip, embedded in everything I owned, impossible to clean. Then came the sound. In the middle of the humid, silent Houston night, with the windows closed against the city's breath, I'd hear the sound of a hot, dry wind whistling, as if I were in the middle of a desert plain. "It's the old plumbing," I'd whisper into the darkness. "The building's ventilation." I'd grasp at any explanation, no matter how flimsy. The lie I was telling myself came undone one Saturday afternoon. I got home early, my body exhausted. I opened the door and stopped. There, in the middle of my small living room, on the dust I hadn't yet had the heart to clean, was a footprint. A single, perfect, and terrible footprint of a bare foot. The foot was thin, the toes long, and the heel was a web of deep cracks, like the earth of a river that dried up a century ago. I live alone. The door was locked. I felt the air leaving me. On Monday at work, I tried to talk to Luis, another co-worker who also came from below. I tried to sound casual. "That's strange, Luis. I think I'm seeing things in this heat. I even saw a footprint in the sand on my floor." He laughed, slapping me on the back. "Ah, Carlos, it's the fatigue, my friend. This humidity makes us crazy. Have a beer and relax. Our minds play tricks on us." His advice, well-meaning, only made me feel more alone. This wasn't a figment of my imagination. Someone or something with feet from the desert had been in my house. Terror then took root. My thirst became agony. Water seemed to pass right through me without touching me. I felt perpetually dehydrated, my skin dry, my lips perpetually chapped. Memories of the crossing began to leak into my day. In the heat emanating from the Houston asphalt, I saw shivering skeletal figures dancing in the distance. Once, I saw Miguel across a busy avenue, his face a mask of suffering, beckoning me to come to him. I blinked, and he was gone. The presence in my apartment became palpable. I could feel pockets of dry, feverish heat in random corners of the room. One night, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest, a crushing pressure, and a thirst so intense it felt like the very moisture in my body was being sucked from my body. I opened my eyes, and for an instant, in the darkness above me, I saw the outline of a face, its eyes sunken and its mouth open, as if drinking the air I exhaled. The confrontation came without warning. I came home from work on a Friday, and when I opened the door, I was hit by a wave of air so hot and dry that my lungs burned. The humidity of Houston had disappeared, replaced by the still suffocating air of a desert tomb. The floor of the apartment was covered in a thin layer of pale sand, and in the center of the room, where the footprint had been, was its source. It wasn't a ghost, not like in the stories. It was an entity made of the very agony of the desert. It was shaped like a man, but composed of shimmering heat and sand and dust. Its silhouette twisting like a mirage. Where a face should have been, there was a void, a vortex of shimmering air. The figure raised an arm that seemed made of dry twigs, and for a moment its face solidified into Miguel's features, its cracked lips moving soundlessly, begging for water. In that moment, I understood with a clarity that broke me inside. It didn't want to haunt me. It didn't want revenge. It wanted to drink. I envied the water in my cells, the saliva in my mouth, the sweat on my skin. I was a walking oasis in his eternal suffering, and he was there to dry me off. There was no fighting. My only answer was flight. That night, I left everything. I left behind my clothes, my job, the fragile life I had tried to build. I boarded a bus headed north to wherever it was cold. I traveled for days, sleeping and waking with the taste of sand in my mouth. But with every mile I got away from Texas, I felt the weight lift. I ended up in Denver, where the air was cold and thin. I found a room, a job. For a month, there was peace. The agonizing thirst subsided. The nightmares became rare. I thought I had escaped. I thought I had left the ghost behind in the warmth of the South. This morning, I woke to the cold of the mountains. I went into the small bathroom to wash my face. I turned on the faucet and the water came out cold and pure. I cupped my hands and brought it to my face, a baptism of relief. I took a sip, feeling the welcome coolness run down my throat. Then I lifted my head and looked at my reflection in the mirror. But it wasn't me staring back at me. It was Miguel's face, his eyes sunken, his skin stretched tight over his bones, his mouth open in a silent cry of thirst. I screamed and stumbled backward, and the image in the mirror flickered, Miguel's face dissolving into a vortex of heat like a mirage in the desert. I spat the water into the sink, and what came out of my mouth wasn't liquid. It was a handful of dust and fine sand which settled on the white porcelain, and I understood there was no escape. The echo of the desert wasn't in a Houston apartment. It was inside me. I wasn't the haunted one. I was the haunted house. And I would carry the desert and its thirst with me forever.